Well, welcome everybody. We're going to give just a few more minutes, probably about 5 minutes for folks to get settled in, computers working like they should, and everybody invited into the meeting. So give us another 5 minutes and we'll get started. Thanks. Okay. Well, it looks like the amount of people coming in are slowing down, so maybe we've got most everybody. Been about 5 minutes since we started, and thanks again for coming. This is the public hearing for a proposed land exchange called the Columbus Peak Ranch LLC Land Exchange. I want to thank everybody for attending this Zoom virtual public hearing. We're hopeful this is the last one. I think we are getting a little bit antsy to get out in the field to meet everybody face to face and to have these conversations, not through a camera, but in person. So hopefully our next one will be that way. But thanks again for making the time, taking the extra effort to get on the Zoom and attend this way. I'd like to take some time to introduce the staff that we have on this hearing. First, we have Jennifer Scoggin. She's the Director of the Office of State Lands and Investments. We also have Holly Dyer, our Assistant Director for our Trust Land Management Division. And we have Ben Bump behind the scenes. He's the Assistant Director of our Field Services Division. Ben is the guy that gets us out into the interweb and delivers us to you through your screens. And without him, none of this would work. Every time we've appeared virtually, it's because Ben has been in the background pushing this forward. So thanks, Ben. Everybody is silently giving you a round of applause. So thank you again for that. Again, we are on Zoom. There is some etiquette that we need to follow being on Zoom. Whenever you are promoted to be able to speak, make sure you unmute yourself or mute yourself, whatever is appropriate, to kind of be aware that everybody else can hear everything that's going on in the background wherever you are. So be a little bit aware of that. When we call on you, when we get to the question portion, please state your name before your question or state your name before your comment so that we know who you are and we can address you appropriately. And also be aware this is being live streamed on YouTube and will be held forever on YouTube. So just be aware that that's happening. Anybody who wanted to speak, and this is mostly for everybody watching on YouTube right now, needed to register beforehand. There was a link that was sent out with the notice to register. So if you don't have that link and you didn't register, then we're not going to be able to accept a verbal comment from you today. But that doesn't mean we can't accept a written one. Please provide written comments to us either through the mail or through an email, and we'll have some of that information at the end of this presentation. So, but just be aware, if you're looking for a place to comment and you're sitting on YouTube, you're not going to be able to. Some of what we've got for you today is a short PowerPoint presentation, just to give a very high level of what the transaction is. Talk about our office, who we are, why we do what we do, who we serve, what brought us to where we are today. And then we'll get into a short question and answer period. We believe that you have been given the detailed analysis, and that's everything we know about this transaction. We spent a lot of time putting that together. So if there's any questions that aren't in that detailed analysis, we'd love to answer them. Otherwise, we're coming at it from the perspective that you have read that. And if you don't understand it, we can try to clarify, but we're hoping that everybody reads it and we're not here all night answering questions. So we'll try to keep that to 5 or 10 minutes or so. If questions pop up after this presentation, feel free to email us, give us a call later. We'll answer those anytime. And then we'll get into the comments period. So this is intended to be a conversation between you and the Board of Land Commissioners. We are here to facilitate that. We can't get into a whole lot of back and forth on the merits of the transaction. We're just simply here providing information for the Board of Land Commissioners to make and inform as much of an informed decision as they possibly can. So that's the whole intent of this, is for you to provide a verbal comment to the board. We're here to accept those and provide them on. I think with that, we'll just move into the slides. And Holly, I'm going to rely on you to tell me how everything looks. If you can see the presentation and it all looks like it's supposed to.
So far, so good, Jason.
Thank you, ma'am. So as I mentioned before, we serve a Board of Land Commissioners. That's our whole charge. The board was created in 1890 via the Constitution. It was put in place to manage certain lands that were granted to the state through the Enabling Act, also in 1890, largely for the public school system, the Common School Permanent Land Fund, but also some other institutions that the Constitution mandated. Those are made up of the 5 statewide elected officials: the governor, the secretary of state, state auditor, state treasurer, and the superintendent of public instruction. And I wanted to specifically call out the provision in the Constitution, Article 18, Section 3, and paraphrased, this is the mission that we are trying to accomplish with all state trust lands that we manage across the state. And it's the Board of Land Commissioners has sole direction, control, disposition, and care of all lands granted to the state to realize the largest possible proceeds. And those proceeds are for the benefit of the beneficiaries. And I think right now is a good time for us to also state, the board manages 3.4 million surface acres across the state and 3.9 million subsurface acres across the state, all for the mission and the purpose of the largest possible proceeds to the beneficiaries. Those beneficiaries that we talk about a lot are mostly the K through 12 public education system. That's 86% of them. The other 14% are the other institutions that the Constitution mentions, like the University of Wyoming. We'll get into those in the next slide, but there's 13 others that we manage for. This is a very important process that the state of Wyoming, the Wyoming Constitution, has put together. It funds roughly half or a little less than half of the education system in the state of Wyoming. And I wanted to highlight some numbers here for you to give you an insight of what we do and what we try to maintain, I guess. In fiscal year 17, we were able to bring in $256 million off of the management and the use of these lands. And again, that goes to the beneficiaries. That has consistently gone down since 2017 to where we're only projecting $89 million in revenues for fiscal year 21. So we've gone from 256 million down to $89 million in just 4 years, which is an incredible drop. And you can understand why the state of Wyoming is in the fiscal situation that it's in. But our charge is to try to maintain a certain level of revenue, a certain consistency with our revenue. And obviously the mineral industry is not what we can depend on, as we have been grown accustomed to depending on. So we're reaching out, we're broadening our horizons to try to reach that consistent level of revenue generation that everybody is expecting from these lands, especially the beneficiaries. These are the 13 beneficiaries identified that we manage for. Every acre is identified to one of these beneficiaries. In this specific transaction that we're talking about, it's for the Agricultural College at the University of Wyoming and the public buildings at the Capitol Complex. We are the Office of State Lands and Investments. Thank you for having us. We strive to effectively manage natural resources and funds for current and future generations. We're made up of 4 divisions: the Trust Land Management Division, which handles all management of all trust land across the state and some other lands as well. But they do all of the surface leasing, the subsurface leasing, the renewable energy leasing, the commercial development, the real estate transactions, anything that happens on a blue square above or below the ground. Holly, who's our assistant director for that division, that's what they get to play with. The Wyoming State Forestry Division does just that. They manage forestry resources on trust lands. They also manage forestry programs on private lands across the state as well. One of their most important charges, though, is direct fire management on state and private lands. They also partner very closely with the federal agencies to ensure fire management and protection of resources from wildfires across the state. We have our Field Services Division. Ben Bump, who's our man behind the scenes, he oversees this division. This group oversees the compliance of all of our leases, our permits, our easements, anything that happens on the ground. They're the boots on the ground, ensuring that it's done appropriately. I would like to say all 5 of them, maybe we have 6 now, 6 of them across the state of Wyoming, managing all of those millions of acres. This is the group also that handles all of our appraisal work. They ensure that we get the proper appraisals on each project. They also do all the appraisal reviews. They're certified appraisers through USPAP and through the state of Wyoming. So they're a good, talented group of folks. The Administrative Services Division, this group handles all of our money. This handles all of the hopefully hundreds of millions of dollars that come into the office through use of these lands. They distribute them appropriately to the specific beneficiaries. They also make sure that all of our bills are paid. And then separate from trust land, they do all of our grants and loans activities as well, providing funds to cities, towns, and counties, and to the farm loan program. We manage state trust land through a lens called the Trust Land Management Objectives. These objectives were given to us broadly through the legislature and then more narrowly focused by the Board of Land Commissioners. So I'll run through these real quick, but it's important to note that everything we do, we consider trust land management objectives when we review them. So that's land sales, acquisitions, exchanges, any long-term situations like a lease or an easement. They all go through this trust land management objectives checklist. There's 3 of them. Not every action on a piece of state land needs to meet all 3. It could meet only 1 or it could meet a couple, but we want to make sure that it's somehow tied to these trust land management objectives. It's also important to note that we take these in priority order. Meaning number 1 is number 1, number 2 is number 2, and number 3 is number 3. So keep that in mind as we're walking through this. Number 1 is to better meet the beneficiary's short and long-term objectives. And the first part of that is revenue generation. Again, we talked about all the beneficiaries we are here to serve and the amount of money that they're expecting from us. And that's what they operate on in large part. So we will do our best to improve revenue generation in any way we can, in a sustainable way, of course. But that's the first thing we look at is how can we generate revenue, responsible revenue from these lands, all lands from all uses across the state. And many times we try to stack uses on top of each other, find the compatible use scenario where we can double our money off of the same acre. That's very critical to how we do business. The next is investment value. It's extremely important that our portfolio is diversified, not only through a certain amount of land ownership and a certain amount of investment, but also the types of uses that we have across the state. We need to have a certain amount of timber resources, a certain amount of grazing resources, commercial resources, mineral resources. So if one industry starts falling, maybe another one can pick it up and we don't have an inconsistent revenue stream going back to the beneficiaries. The second objective is to improve manageability of the land, basically how we can do our jobs more efficiently. As you can see on the maps on this slide, when we were granted acres at statehood in 1890, we were given every section 16 and 36 of each township. And then some other weirdness went on through the Homestead Act. But largely, you see just a shotgun approach of the land ownership pattern that we are entrusted with. When we can consolidate that ownership away from the single section parcels into larger blocks, that comes with an obvious efficiency gain. So we try to do that anytime that we can. We also try to leverage management from other agencies. We have very good working relationships with the Game and Fish Department, the Department of Environmental Quality, the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, as well as the Forest Service and the BLM. We talk consistently amongst each other about what's happening on our lands. They highlight things that we should be aware of, and then we can concentrate our efforts in a more efficient manner. And we do the same thing for them, so that these 6 or 5 field guys that we have across the state are driving in the right direction and not just around. The third trust land management objective is to meet a specific school or community need. This is for possibly a municipality needs to grow and they have no other way to grow other than onto a piece of state trust land. So we would help facilitate that in some way, provide that opportunity for growth in that local area. And then you'll notice C under number 3 is to improve access and recreational opportunities. And this is at the bottom for a very specific reason. One, maybe a couple very specific reasons. One, it is not mandated in the Constitution or in statute that we provide public access to the recreating public. That was granted to the public through a privilege or board rule in 1988, where they did grant that privilege with some restrictions to the public to recreate on those lands. So they haven't always been open. People have used them obviously prior to 1988, but in 1988, that's when the authority was granted to provide the privilege to the public to recreate on these lands. We don't generate any revenue from these. We do have some outfitting leases. We do have some scattered recreation leases, very specific across the state. But for general hunting, general fishing, general recreation, hiking, bird watching, rock climbing, whatever, we don't receive any monetary benefit from that. So there's no benefit to the beneficiaries from that opportunity, which if it's not paying, then it does fall to the bottom of these objectives. Now, we have done a lot of transactions, and I've got a slide next that I want to highlight, but that you can do both. You can do trust land management objective number 1 and have a benefit to number 3 at the same time. And because of some of the comments we've received thus far and a lot of the questions that we received, I went ahead and put our program performance sheet for our real estate transaction program in here. And I wanted to just kind of show that this is a program that has a lot of activity around it. In 2006, the legislature granted us authority to do real, true transactions by ourselves with legislative oversight, or not, I won't say oversight, but gave us the statutes that we could do the program under. And since 2006, we have done 80 transactions. In fact, I think that's a few more than 80 now. We've increased our annual use revenue by $320,000 a year, and that's from additional revenue from leases, easements, permits, anything above what we were getting before. So this is increased by even considering what we may have lost in those transactions, but we've increased by $320,000 a year. We've also increased investment revenue by $3.2 million a year, and that's from proceeds that we would get from the sale of a piece of property, or like in this transaction, when the proponent owes us a cash equalization payment, that gets deposited into the permanent land fund of the specific beneficiary. And from the investment of those funds, we've returned $3.2 million back to the beneficiaries. From that same activity, from sale of lands, from cash equalization payments, we've been able to deposit over $83 million into the permanent land funds of the beneficiaries. We've also maintained ownership acreage within a legislative directive. So back in 2005, the legislature told us to implement a 10,000 acre no net gain or loss strategy. So we used a baseline amount of acres that was developed back in 1999, and we haven't deviated more than 10,000 acres above and below that baseline. In fact, currently right now, I believe we're 3,800 acres under that baseline. So we've been able to provide that much benefit, the numbers that I mentioned before, with staying roughly within the same amount of acreage under ownership across the state. And we've also been able to increase publicly accessible acreage by over 37,000 acres, which is a huge deal, because you're able to create monetary benefit to the beneficiaries through real estate transactions, as well as provide opportunities for the public, that privilege to use state trust lands for recreating purposes, for hunting and fishing and the like. I know that those 37 acres aren't in everybody's backyard, and they are statewide, but that's where we can have our effect, I guess, is statewide. So we can get into more detail if anybody wants to about where those specific gains have occurred. We've got a couple highlighted here on the screen, but just make everybody aware that we're not always trying, we're never trying to kick people off of land. It's just we have certain objectives we're trying to secure with each transaction we go into. The exchange process. So as you can see, there's a lot of boxes on this screen. It's somewhat of a lengthy process for us to get an exchange through and to final approval. And a lot of them don't get that far. So a proposal is submitted to us. We review it internally. We determine if it has the potential to meet the trust land management objectives. And if it does, we present it to the director, and we ask and present her everything we know about it. And if she agrees, she moves it to the category 2 status. If she doesn't agree, the transaction dies right there, and we move on. But if she does agree, we develop a preliminary detailed analysis for review by the Board of Land Commissioners. We present that preliminary analysis to them in an executive session pursuant to statute. There is a land acquisition component with exchanges, and we need to keep that confidential so we don't have a major impact on land values in the local area. So we provide that to them in confidence. We keep everything confidential at this point, provide it to them in executive session. And if they believe as well that it has the opportunity to meet trust land management objectives and something we should move forward on, they ask us to present it to them in an open session so that they can review it publicly. But if they don't want to see it again, then it dies right there. If they do, then we move it into a public hearing, or the next regularly scheduled public meeting of theirs. We provide the same information to them then that we provided in the executive session, and they vote to allow us to move forward with the analysis process or not. So if they vote not to allow us to move forward, then it dies right there and we don't take any more action. But if they do vote to allow us to move forward, then we begin the more detailed analysis, which I hope everybody has received and read. We move into the appraisal process. We move into negotiating the agreement to initiate the exchange with the proponent and get all of the details ironed out. And if there's some weirdness that we need to iron out, we iron it out here to make sure that we have a good, solid transaction that we feel confident we can present to the public and have something that has some chance of success moving forward. And once we get to that point, we publish the detailed analysis, which you all saw through notices. And at that point, it begins the public comment period, the 60-day public comment period. And in the middle, where we are at today, we do a public hearing where we solicit verbal public comments from you. So we have a 60-day window for you to tell us what you think about the transaction, the good and the bad. And in this particular case, that'll cease on June 14th. Once we get everything in, all the verbal comments, all the written comments, we pull those all together, compile them for the Board of Land Commissioners, deliver them that plus the detailed analysis in plenty of time for them to review each and every comment that we receive. And trust me, they review each and every comment that we receive. They will deliberate that as they will review that as they're doing their deliberations for ultimate review of the transaction. We present it to them at a final board meeting, an open public hearing, all the information that I just spoke about, and they will vote to either approve the transaction or deny the transaction. So if they deny it, we're done. We don't do any more work on it. And if they approve it, obviously we move into the closing process and complete the transaction. So that's us. That's who we are. That's why we do what we do and how we do it. So let's get into the actual thing that we're all here to talk about, which is the Columbus Peak Ranch Exchange. From a high level, we're going to start out and we're going to zoom our way in. This is the exchange. You can see the parcel, the disposal parcel in purple and the acquisition parcel in green, all in Sheridan County. I think it's important to note here that Sheridan County has probably one of the highest amount of large blocks of state trust land that we have across the state, mostly concentrated in Sheridan County. Zooming in a little bit, you can see how these parcels that we're talking about are situated around the town of Dayton and around existing blocks of state trust land. And we'll talk about the Columbus Peak parcel first, and we're calling it the Columbus Peak parcel because that's the parcel that Columbus Peak Ranch LLC owns. It's not what they lease. It's not where their headquarters is at. It's what they own and what we would acquire in this transaction. So throughout this presentation, the Columbus Peak parcel is the acquisition parcel. This is a zoomed in view of it. You can notice it's got road access through the Dayton East Road. It's also got halfway lane close. What's not shown on the map are power lines that traverse the property, as well as the natural gas line that was recently installed. Really, we provide this kind of zoom in picture for you to look at, and I'm sure you've all already seen the maps. More detail about it, obviously it's in Sheridan County. It's 2.5 miles east of Dayton. It has 628.35 acres associated with it. We've estimated the AUMs to be 225. It sits just north of a contiguous block of state trust land. That block has 1,840 acres within it. it is also enrolled in an existing Game and Fish walk-in area number 11. There are some adjacent private lands to it. That's walk-in area number 9. We anticipate working with the Game and Fish to include this, if this transaction is successful, into walk-in area 11 or 9, or maybe pull them both together, but provide about 3,000 acres in total within that walk-in area. We're going to talk about some revenue and some benefit to the beneficiaries in a minute. But this will allow public access to the 560 or 628 acres through the Dayton East Road and some other points from the south. And having all of that access to those development amenities, meaning the county road, the power line, the gas line, and whatever else may come, we have more potential for development activities in the future for a beneficiary benefit. We're anticipating revenue from the Columbus Peak parcel, obviously from the grazing and agricultural lease. We have that bracketed between $1,244 and $5,062 because we have a minimum set by the Board of Land Commissioners, that 225 AUMs at the board's minimum rate of $5.53 will return $1,244. However, we also know that we will offer this property in a competitive nature for bid for the grazing rights, and the statewide average for grazing on a per AUM rate is $22.50, and that times 225 AUMs gives you $5,062. So we're bracketing it. We've done all of our analysis based on the 1,244, but we have the opportunity to go up to $5,000. We're also going to have a cash equalization payment, which we'll talk about here in a minute, owed to the state. And that is expected to return over $17,000 a year. That's based on a 5-year average from the state treasurer's office, where those permanent land funds are returning an average of 4.34%. So those combined, if this transaction is approved, we anticipate revenue from the transaction to be between $19,000 and $22,000 a year. So the parcel we're going to dispose of is highlighted here on the screen in purple. We're calling it the state trust land parcel. You can see how it's configured and how it has the reservoir that lies half on private, half on state land. You also notice, I'm sorry, I'm jumping too fast ahead of myself, but that there are no roads, public roads, I guess, that lead into this parcel like we had with the previous Columbus Peak parcel. The details of this one is that it lies 4 miles northwest of Dayton, has 210 AUMs on it. It has 560 acres there. It abuts 1,960 acres of contiguous trust land, providing a full block of around 2,500 acres in total. It, again, has no road access to the parcel. It is publicly accessible via the Columbus Creek Road, but that is a hike to get into it. There's no direct road access to this specific 560 acres. We've got 1 easement on the property and 1 grazing and agricultural lease. We do derive revenue from it, and it's bracketed as well at this minimum $5.53 per AUM, which is what it currently returns. We get around $1,161. However, it did receive a conflicting bid. Somebody attempted to secure the property and place a higher bid on it 10 years ago, and that bid was $12.04. So for the 10 years previous to this one, we were receiving $2,500 a year for it. However, not receiving a conflicting bid for the next 10-year term, we're only receiving $1,161. And so that's the revenue we have highlighted here. That's the only thing that we have coming off of this property at the moment. We did do the appraisal on the property. The Columbus Peak parcel appraised at $1,885,050. The state trust parcel appraised at $2,296,000, creating an unequal situation. So the statute allows us to have up to a 25% cash equalization payment. The difference here is $410,950. So the proponent would owe that to the Board of Land Commissioners. It would get deposited once paid into the permanent land funds for the specific beneficiaries and generate the $17,000 like we mentioned earlier. It's important to note, and I think I said it at the beginning, but I'll say it again here. The proponent selected the appraiser. We approved the appraiser based on his qualifications. He was a certified appraiser to do this type of work. He was certified under USPAP standards. We then reviewed his work by our in-house appraisers, who are also certified USPAP appraisers, and determined that the process and analysis that the appraiser used was appropriate to determine the value. We always try, and we've been very successful in having the same appraiser appraise the private land as well as the state land, so that we have more of an apples to apples review of the parcels to try to make sure that we're getting the most appropriate value when we move into these transactions. In the summary, like we just mentioned, the revenue from the state trust land is 1161 right now. It has 560 acres. The legally accessible acreage is 560 acres, and its appraised value is $2,296,000. The Columbus Peak parcel, the use plus the investment revenue that we spoke about earlier, comes out to a little over $19,000 per year. It has 628.35 acres. All of those 628.35 acres are legally accessible, and its appraised value was $1,885,050. So the net benefit, when you combine those two together, we have all positive numbers that show up, and we have a net increase of $17,918,000 per year, a net increase in acreage of 68.35 acres, a net increase of legally accessible acreage of 68.35 acres, and an amount to be invested with the State Treasurer's Office to help in the diversification part of the objectives of $410,950. So with that, I think we will go ahead and open it up to questions. Again, these aren't comments, so if you have any questions, please raise your hand now and we will move into those. Again, this isn't a question and answer session. This is a public comment session, so we don't want to spend all night with this, and we'll keep an eye on the clock, and if we need to call it into it, we will. But Ben, it looks like Rick Clark has his hand up. And Rick, I think you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. We're not hearing you, Rick. I don't know.
Jason, it looks like he's dropped off of the attendee list. I wonder if anyone else would like to raise their hand.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and go to Rick Parrish.
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So my question is in reviewing these documents, I know that the appraisals were appraised differently in the fact that they went by best use, and so I feel that the best use category for the private land may have altered the actual value of that land, because and so my question is why were not both parcels either for grazing or agricultural use or for rural development? Because also on page 5 of your property information, you have the statement, the proximity to the Bighorn National Forest and Bighorn Mountain Range appeals to outside buyers seeking properties with access to recreational opportunities. So obviously, in your own review, you stated that either of them could sustain residential development. But I feel that with the so my question is since the appraisals were done differently, giving a higher value on an appraisal to the private parcel, this Cloud Peak Ranch parcel, I'm wondering about the validity of the cash equalization payment with that. Could someone answer that?
Sure. Rick, thanks for the question, and thanks for sending it earlier today. We went in and reviewed the appraisal to make sure that we were understanding it correctly. And what we find in that appraisal is that they both have the highest and best use. It's ag recreation. And I'm happy to help you work through that as well later offline. And I can show you where they were analyzed based on the same highest and best use. And that's ag recreation.
I was told differently in previous conversations with you. So yes, I'd be very interested because that is a turnabout of what our discussions have been previously to this. Thank you.
Okay. Ben, I see Pete Kassab. I think you're still muted, Pete.
Nah, I figured it out. Technology, it's fine when it works.
There we go.
Sorry about that. So I had two really quick questions for you. Reading through the documentation, and thank you to everyone that helped to develop this, because it's really great detail to be able to dig into. On page 2, there's a reference to the development opportunities for the Columbus Peak parcel. Additionally, on page 12, and Ben, I sent these questions to you also. There's some language surrounding that the Columbus Peak parcel also includes county road access, power line access, natural gas line access, etc. When you developed your analysis, was the blunt intention to be able to, as a long-term basis, be able to develop that ground for future residential or commercial property?
Thanks, Pete. That's a great question. And I think that's what the analysis that we went through bore out. I think we recognized that the 560 acres is tapped out on its revenue generating ability. There's not good legal access to the parcel to further development for whatever reason, for commercial reasons, for residential reasons. But the amount of revenue that we currently get off of it is all that we're ever going to be able to get off of it. And then we recognize the parcel, the Columbus Peak parcel, with all of those development amenities, that sometime in the future, it's not capped in its potential. And we've been managing land for 131 years. We hope to do it for 130 more. And so we're not looking to develop this parcel right away. We're going to wait for the market to tell us when the time is appropriate, and do whatever, pursue any options that are available to us at that time. So it is a long-term management process, I guess. I think you categorized that correctly.
Mm-hmm. So that leads to my second question. And I understand where you're coming from, that the potential's there without question. I mean, when I viewed that property, holy cow, there's great opportunity, and the views are just fantastic to be able to build residential properties on it. My second question is, as it pertains to the appraisal that was completed by the Wyoming Certified General Appraiser, did that take into account current, like, I don't, and I guess I'm not sure if my question poses it properly, but I'll try and do it verbally here. The potential, the upside potential as it pertains to residential. In your document, it states that you can't speculate, but without speculating, when I look at the numbers and I live here in Sheridan region, that people are getting now for ground, if you even halved what current land appraisal values are, it would blow that appraiser out of the water as it pertains to appraisal out of the water as it pertains to the Columbus Peak portion.
Okay.
So is there any way, I guess I'm questioning that appraisal to say, geez, it just seems way low when I look at what land values are, just bare ground land values and what they're going for without any sort of development on them. it's just not in line with where the current acreage is,
Yeah,
price per acre.
yeah. And I think that's a good concern, Pete. Thank you for raising it. I will tell you that those of us on the real estate transaction side do not talk to the appraisers on the appraisal side. We don't want to have any influence on the value. We want to make sure this is a pure discussion between the appraiser and the review appraiser, and that they are doing everything as they're required to do under their certifications. So I don't know the direct answer to your question. I will say that I don't want to pay any more for that parcel than I have to, and if we have to go back and review it and the value goes up, perhaps we pay more as a state. So
No, and I don't want the state to pay more either. I guess I'm just questioning, and maybe this is a debate for offline, but I'm just questioning the appraiser numbers overall as it pertains to the delta that's being paid by the private landowner.
sure, and we can dig into that a little bit more offline. We can get the appropriate parties on the phone that would have some answers for you.
Okay, thank you.
Ben, I don't see anybody else. Oh, sorry, Gail Smith.
I'm just curious if you'd be willing to accept a third-party appraisal for someone else to look at this and appraise both those pieces of property and get their opinion on it, because it sounds like there's a lot of people that know this area pretty well, and just gut feeling says that these appraisals are not accurate. Just curious if you'd be willing to entertain that.
I think it's a good question, Gail. As we showed earlier in the presentation, this is a very long and tedious process to get to the point where we're at today. And to start it over, we would have to start the process over with a new appraisal, because that enters in new information into our analysis on the transaction side. If the values change our numbers, our revenue numbers, our investment numbers, and things like that. So it would start the process over again. And what that would mean is we would be 2 years from now with an appraisal looking at sales that were older than maybe some people would like. So we could look at it if this appraisal really does, or if there's information provided to us that this appraisal is really not a good one for us to use, we can stop this and start over again and look at another appraisal. But at the moment, we've had a lot of state certified people, both on the state side and the private side, look at this and agree that it's an appropriate appraisal.
I'm a little curious too on the value of it, because we were at a town hall meeting in Ranchester about a week ago, and I asked a game and fish official there if there was fish in that reservoir that the landowner would be acquiring from the state, and they didn't know. And I would think that would be kind of something important in this study, knowing what's the value of that property. It would include fish in that reservoir. I've heard people say there is, I've heard people say there isn't. That's even from the game and fish. And so if we don't know if there's fish in that reservoir, how is that value accurate? I see there was no habitat analysis done on either one of those pieces of property. When we say that it's value for value, there was no habitat analysis made. And I guess the other thing that I want to pose a question is if there was an environmental impact study done on what would happen to that little ecosystem over there on the current state land when that landowner begins to irrigate like he has said he intends to do. Has there been an impact study done on what's going to happen to that little ecosystem over there that's really rich in wildlife now? And when you start pulling water out of that, what's that going to do to that ecosystem over there?
Sure. Yeah. No, we haven't done an environmental impact statement. We're not subject to the NEPA Protection Act, Environmental Protection Act. So we haven't done that analysis. Any more questions, Gail, or we can move on to Rick?
You move on to Rick.
Thanks, Gail. Thank you very much. Rick, I think we have you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Good to see you, Jason. I appreciate the professionalism. We all realize, you know, you have to work with the state and there's laws and you have to follow all of those. I have some just kind of logistical kind of questions. The June 14th deadline is rapidly approaching for input from the public, and it almost seems like the public is just finding out about all this. And you know, I first learned of it in mid-April, and I think that's April 13th. I think that's when you guys put your notice out. A lot of people don't know. They have no idea what's going on. There's people in the area don't even realize there's state land up here that's accessible by the public. Is there any way to extend that June 14th deadline? You know, there's the meetings in August. There's 2 months between the deadline and almost 2 months before the Board of Commissioners meet. Is there a way to extend that so we could have a little more time? You know, the landowners had, you know, some describe it as it's been about a 2-year process, and we, you know, are just kind of running around trying to figure out what to do. We're not really organized as a very well to try to counter what we all consider to be not a very good deal for people that like the outdoors.
Sure. And I think that we can make that determination at the end of this 60-day period. If good faith effort was made on your side to try to understand the transaction, if it's really more time is needed, we can present that to the director and ask for an extension of time. But also, you know, we need to pay attention to our time as well. So we need to review each and every comment that comes in and marry that up against the detailed analysis and the trust land management objectives. So we need a little bit of time to understand if those comments require additional work on our end before that board meeting. And we don't want to be analyzing this for years and years and years. So we've got to put an end date on it sometime. I think that right now it might be premature to say, yes, we're going to extend without going through the next 3 to 4 weeks that we have out in front of us.
Okay, that kind of brings up my next question is, when is it that the Board of Land Commissioners receive the letters? Are they kind of seeing what's going on as they're sent in, or do they just at this August 5th meeting, they sit down and for the first time, they start looking at letters?
Yeah, great question, Rick. No, as soon as this public comment period is up, we pull them all together. We've been watching them come in and reviewing them as they come in, but we don't put that burden on each board member. We'll wait till the end of the public comment period. We'll compile them into one document, provide them. I think we're required to provide it to them 1 week in advance of their meeting, but we'll do that several weeks in advance of their meeting since we have that kind of time on this transaction. But at this point, they haven't been keeping abreast comment by comment, day by day, as the public comment period progresses.
Okay, and another question. This one is a little bit, it's not as easy to track, but I think something really the state as a whole needs to take a look at. How do you measure the value of land that is this beautiful, this pristine, just incredible piece of land? How do you measure that in regard to tourism? You know, tourism is a big moneymaker in the state, 161 million last year in a bad year. Projections are, you know, from the U.S. Tourism, there's just been some information that just came out. Tourism is going to be up. The mask mandate's over. People are going to be traveling. That's bringing a lot of money to the state. Yet we're going to park this, turn this other land into real estate and exchange this beautiful scenic land that brings the kind of land that brings tourists here. That's going to be gone forever. How do we measure, or how do you measure, or is there a measure for the value of land in regard to tourism? The people come here because it is one of the most beautiful states in the union.
Great question again, Rick. it would be valued through the appraisal process. And I don't know all the ins and outs. We try to maintain a wall between us so we could ask if that was accounted for within the actual per acre value. But I also want to note for the group, and because this is somewhat of a confusing point, is that obviously the state of Wyoming benefits from tourism and recreation dollars as a state. However, our charges to the trust beneficiaries, and they don't share in that same pot of money. They don't share in that revenue stream. And so we need to be concentrated on what the beneficiaries actually benefit from. And that's why we've shown you what we've shown you and then what we put in the detailed analysis, and it doesn't include tourism.
I understand. But anyway, do you think it's fair to say that taxes received from tourists are substantial?
Rick, I don't play in that world. I'm sure they are, but I don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, that's my final question. There are some, I guess, just a comment. There are some issues, such as what is crucial habitat, which the state really is not going into very well. Excuse me.
Mind, we'll let Rick Parrish ask one more question, and then we'll jump into the comment period, and we'll actively start taking notes at that point.
Okay, thanks.
Rick Parrish.
Me? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Thanks.
Yeah, it said that you muted me. I thought I was on your bad side already. Okay, so following up on Rick's, when it says that land, that the state trust parcel, that's all the value you'd ever get from it. I sort of disagree with that statement, because with Rick, I was going to ask, what is the tourism dollars in Sheridan County, and what's the tourism dollars? I always get a little upset when they look at out-of-state versus in-state tourism dollars. I'm a tourist in my own home state because whenever I go anywhere else, I'm buying food, hotels, merchandise, things of that nature. And I think that that number should be added to the value of that property, because if you are around here in the summertime, in the fall, there's lots and lots of people looking for land to go and recreate on, view, and enjoy. But back to my question is, earlier it was said that this had set it back by 2 years. So my question is what is the hurry? Because this decision, this is perpetuity. This land will be lost to the public forever once this decision is made. And I think that really, as it was stated earlier, the 60-day comment period at the end, I think that's the biggest thing that really sticks out to all the people that, I've attended the meeting in Ranchester, I've talked to multiple people in the area, is the fact that, this is a very special piece of property in Sheridan County. Let's have a proper review of it, and let's get the best deal for the state. So if it is residential development, one of my questions is, what about the parcel that is adjacent to the city of Ranchester on the northwest corner? There's development on both the south and the east end of it. It would hook up to city water and sewer. If you're looking at investment potential for your the people that get the money from this, I would say that would be something that the state should look at. It's already have a holding. You still have the other parcels for later review down the road. And so my question is, back to what is the hurry? This $17,000 or $19,000 is not going to break the bank for the state of Wyoming. And so there's my question.
Well, thanks for that. And I think that's a good question. And I think what we need to relay to the group is that we do not participate in the private real estate market. We don't want to have the state of Wyoming come in with a sledgehammer or a very large perceived pocketbook and chase other private people out of the real estate market. That's not what we do. we take opportunities as they come to us. We have a set criteria, the trust land management objectives, and then a few others that we talk about specific to real estate transactions that we measure each opportunity against, but we wait for the opportunities to come to us. And if an opportunity comes to us without any end in sight, then those opportunities start drying up. And we don't have the benefit of this program like I showed you in the beginning, because folks will stop providing these opportunities to us. So we want to be responsive to the proponents. We want to make sure that we're getting a good deal for the state. I think that's a very accurate statement, and we strive to do that. And I think that's why the process is as cumbersome as it is. And while there's a lot of really in-depth internal review before we provide something to the public, because imagine if we provided you something that we didn't look at all. This would be a very long meeting. So I think that's very appropriate. We can't just go out and buy that parcel next to Ranchester if the seller's not willing to sell it to us, and we don't want to chase anybody in the private market off.
You misunderstood me. It's a state parcel.
Oh,
It's
well, then
mar-
we're waiting for the market to tell us what kind of development is there. We do not know the ins and outs of Ranchester like the folks in Ranchester, the developers around Ranchester. So we're waiting for the opportunities again to show up. What we do here, based on the limited staff that we have and our core office is in Cheyenne, it's hard for us to know everything in those states. So we like to provide these opportunities, lay these parcels of land in front of opportunities, and have the market tell us what's the best use and the best timing of it.
Well, I know that you've done a terrific job of explaining what your duties are and things of that nature, and that you have guidelines and stuff to follow. I'm just throwing out that you're looking at this for future development, things of that nature, but you also have the people of the state of Wyoming also have trust in that the process and everything else is done correctly, and that other options could be looked at, things of that nature. So I don't even know if you know that you have a piece of property that's right up against the city limits of Ranchester on the northwest corner there. It's quite large, and so if you were looking to make money, because obviously the Columbus Peak Ranch area, because it has those utilities and roadways through it, is a prime development corridor. You have another prime development corridor that I would say the people of Sheridan County would probably be more acceptable to, that is just adjacent to the city boundaries of Ranchester on the northwest corner. So just, there's my 2 cents on that, and thank you for letting me speak again.
Very good. Ben, I think maybe we'll just move into the comment period. Some of these questions are sounding more like comments. So let's go ahead and close question and answer. And if there are questions going forward, we're happy, any one of us, to chat on the phone or send an email back and forth as we go through this process. But
Jason, if I may jump in, Pete Kasab wanted to just do one quick follow-up.
Yeah, just one quick follow-up for you, Jason. The appraisal was done on June 26, 2020. And we all know what's happened to the market as it pertains to land values and appraisals in Wyoming since that time. I mean, it's just gone absolutely nuts here. And going back to what I stated earlier in terms of the questions that I gave Ben, can we get to independent appraisals beyond what we have today? I don't think that sets us back 2 years by any point, Jason. It might set us back a month, but just get more detail and more analysis so that for the state of Wyoming and for everyone involved, we know right where we stand from an appraisal value, and make sure that we really are doing the comparative analysis. And I'm not questioning anyone from State Lands and Investments. I understand your charter and what your mission statement is. I just think that data alone, just on that premise alone, we should pump the brakes until we can make sure that our data is accurate, because it clearly can't be.
sure. and great follow-up, Pete. I think you're pointing to one of the really hard things for us to manage in counties or markets like Sheridan, Western Sheridan County. We have the same issue around Cheyenne. We have the same issue in Teton County. The markets move extremely fast. And for us to be able to fit it into our process and get an appraisal done and through all the review, there's time in there that the market may have shifted. I think what we expect the appraisers to do is understand that. Obviously, they do put a date on it, that's the value as of that date. But they also make comments. We've seen it in other appraisals that this is a fast moving market and we should be aware of that as a user of that report. Also, we anticipate the impact of a fast moving market to be on both parcels, to be on the state parcel and the Columbus parcel. And whatever influence the market has, we're expecting it to have the same impact. So if it increases by 15%, both parcels have increased by 15%. Unless there's something very specific that says parcels with county roads are increasing at 30% rather than 15%. And we haven't recognized that in that market yet. The internal appraisers here haven't recognized that. So we're expecting that the influence is the same on both parcels.
Okay. I'd love to follow up with you, Jason, outside of this call. It's getting late for everybody, but I would love to follow up with you, because if there is an opportunity for us to be able to bring an independent appraisal in and submit that with the documentation, and so we're not slowing your process down, but just get an independent to come in that you could, State Lands and Investments could approve of before, so that we didn't just bring somebody in and say, here's oddball numbers, but someone that you approved of and get some additional analysis done. I think there's multiple people on this line that would raise their hand and say, we'll help with that. We'll get some appraisers.
Very good. Yeah, let's chat again.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to public comment. Tom Hurley, I see your hand up first.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, I had a question. Am I not able to ask a question now? Does it just have to be comment?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're home before midnight.
All right. Okay. Well, I was hoping to get I guess I'll make a comment that was going to be my question and try to leave it at that. I hope that I understand most of the process and how this works and most of the things that have already been talked about. One thing I wasn't clear on and that I think hopefully plays into this is if this decision is based solely basically on the numbers of, just call it the appraisal, the review and everything, the numbers that we have on this deal itself, or if ripple effects of a deal like this that will most definitely have financial ramifications to the state land office, to the state lands, would play into a decision like this. Talking with many people in many organizations, hunting and conservation organizations that are not happy with this, I think it's very clear that there will be ripple effects to state lands as far as programs that support those through hunting and fishing. There's a lot of people pretty upset, and I think there will be a financial impact to things such as when you look at programs that like the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation donating 4,500 acres or something. I can't remember how many it was in the Black Hills. Those have a very high possibility of taking a major hit and impacting the state financially for a long time down the road. And I hope that that's looked at as well as just the immediate numbers in these reports.
Okay, Tom, I'm going to take that as a comment because we haven't heard from Rocky Mountain Elk or anybody like that.
I'm not commenting from them. That's just a comment of mine. But I think we will definitely see things like that in the future if this land trade was to go through.
Jason, could I make a public comment, please?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Pete.
I'm a Wyoming Backcountry Hunters and Anglers board member. Our board has voted unanimously to oppose this land swap. And we all,
You got muted, Pete.
I don't know how much of that you got or didn't get, but I wanted to make sure for public comment that you knew that the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, Wyoming Board of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers opposes the land swap. We're 1,000 members strong here in Wyoming.
Very good. Okay. Gail Smith.
Yeah, I just have a couple comments. When we were talking about the appraisal values and the, when you said that each parcel A and parcel B would be going up the same percentage, that is true, but that disparity between those two property values becomes wider. And then when you start investing that money, like you said you're going to, then that money becomes larger. So time becomes a little bit more important when property values in Sheridan County right now are going up 8 to 12% annually. And that's just regular property. And we've already talked about these two different pieces of property are not even close to being the same. If you've looked at them, you know the difference. So giving it more time would definitely benefit the state in terms of return. I also know that the county commissioners were contacted by the governor's office on what their feedback would be on this land swap. And I contacted them, and 4 out of 5 of them are against this swap. I also know that Senator Bo Beitman and Representative Cyrus Western are both against this swap as well. And those guys are both legislators trying to generate money for the state of Wyoming. Why do you suppose they're against this swap?
Okay. Anybody else want to make a comment? I don't see any more hands up. So if you want to make a comment, please raise your hand. Brett Barney.
Thank you. I'm going to speak in favor of this trade. I'm pretty familiar with the property. And when the current owners purchased this property, 5 years ago, when you look at the habitat that was on it and the hunting opportunities at that time, with the amount of outfitting that was going on, being overgrazed, the roads that were specifically on this 560 acres, and the way that it was being used, I would argue that the hunting opportunities, maybe to the benefit to the public, is certainly better today than it was 5, 6, 7 years ago. And as far as the critical wildlife habitat, as far as the reservoir, I would think if you're in there that much, you'd probably have fished that and you would know what's actually in that reservoir, if there is anything in that reservoir, as opposed to just making that question about it. I think that, again, I think this is a good swap. I think it's good for the public. You know, the state land, the land that's there isn't going to change any. It's going to continue to be improved. The habitat's going to continue to be improved. You know, it's not just because it's not going to be in state land doesn't mean it's not going to go away. It's still going to be there. You're still going to be able to see it. Everything that's living there is still going to continue to live there. Thank you.
Thanks, Brett. Buzz Hedrick.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the one comment I have that I really worry about with this exchange, which I'm opposed to, is the future development of that parcel that the state would acquire. And I've not seen this in any of the detailed analysis, but I do know that it goes on. Let's say that you do dispose of that property eventually and sell it for home development. I don't see where there's any detailed analysis about the future impact of what's left of that state ground. In other words, the homeowners can petition the state to have recreation stopped on the remaining parcel, whatever is left of the state ground, for safety reasons, for a number of different things. And I guess the question I have, I worry that that's going to happen. I've seen it happen on a lot of other places where the state, you know, there's either a private property owner that borders state, and they petition it to have it closed down. And in this case, that just seems like exactly what's going to happen. And so that's my comment there. And then my question, I guess, would be, why is that not part of the detailed analysis?
Thanks, Buzz. There's a certain amount of time that we can look into the future and a certain amount of outcomes that we can analyze for without just analyzing this thing to death. And I think that's out there a ways. We don't know what that could bring. We don't know what kind of development could come. We don't know what kind of recreation access or restrictions would need to come with that. So that's not part of the detailed analysis. But thank you for your comment. Hayden Richens.
I was born and raised in Sheridan County. I've been on that parcel quite a few times. That's not the Columbus Peace parcel, but the state land parcel. And just like everyone else says, I think being born and raised in the area, that the appraisal is fairly inaccurate and that it would only do the state benefit. I understand that it's a fiscal matter more than anything. I do speak from loving to hunt and fish and spend time out there because it's public lands. So I'm pretty biased towards wanting to keep that piece. I think it's trading dimes for pennies. But I think that without an accurate appraisal of both pieces being done now with the spike in property values, that really the numbers that are presented in the documents just aren't accurate. And I hope that they'll get some multiple appraisals done so that we can really see what the value would be worth.
All right, thanks, Hayden. Joel Honig.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, going through the.
Joel, we lost you and you're back and you're muted now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
There we go.
I think I'll keep my mouse away from that mute button. I am aware that there is an issue on the Columbus Peak, the private ground with the pipeline that's going through there. And I do not see anything where that's referenced in this whole analysis. And so I would like to, I guess, understand or make it aware to everybody that there's a potential for a significant issue on that piece of property. And as far as when people are talking about putting this on pause, I think that's a significant issue that needs to be considered and put this whole proposal on pause. The second comment I have is you mentioned that if the appraisal, the increase in the property value, if both were reappraised, you felt that they would both increase in value. And when I look at those two properties, I think that's kind of a questionable assumption to say that both of those two properties are going to be just based on time, that the appraisal is going to be affected the same, because the two properties are significantly different. And I think that appraisal would, I don't think that the appraisal would, the outcome of reappraising both properties would be equal. I think you'd be surprised to see a significant difference in the two appraisals and, you know, the end outcome of this whole proposal. That's all I've got.
Thanks, Joel. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand. I don't have any hands raised right now. Oh, Mike Barrett. Mike, we can't hear you for some reason.
Hit the chat.
Now? Hello?
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, thank you. There's too many buttons. The first thing I'd like to say is fragmenting that large piece of state land is absolutely a mistake. And I hope that the State Land Board does not take the Game and Fish's view that both pieces are similar in hunting opportunities. Nothing could be further from the truth. The other thing I had wondered, I had my hand up, but I couldn't get in a question, and that was about the reason for the exchange. Does the State Land Board request from the private landowner a reason for the exchange, or do you just go forward with their request? Anyway, my comment, I guess, is this is a horrible idea at best, and I was curious about the trigger for the transaction if there is a reason that is required. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And I'll just give you a quick answer on that. We don't dig into the reasons behind a proponent's proposal. We take them and we review them for the opportunities they provide to the state of Wyoming. We don't want to step on anything, any private property right that they may have. Thanks for that, Mike. Jaden Bales.
Hi, Deputy Director Crowder. Thanks for everybody for showing up this evening. I'm here in Lander, Wyoming, representing the Wyoming Wildlife Federation. And we just wanted to comment that we have had significant member interest from the hunter and angler group on this exchange, and stand by our hunters and anglers in that area that have major concerns with this exchange, and fully support looking at this very carefully and making sure that the state comes out with a deal that's favorable for the state and takes in all of the values, both recreational and financial values of these two parcels in the exchange. So like I said, we support our hunters and anglers up there in that part of the world, and appreciate everyone for all your comments tonight. This has been really nice. Thanks.
Thanks, Jaden. Gail Smith.
This might be my last comment. In our town hall meeting in Ranchester, there was a person who asked if Governor Mark Gordon may recuse himself from the vote because he accepted campaign donations from Ross Matthews, and whether that would, cause an issue with voting on this matter. Can you elaborate on that? Is that something that's happened in the past?
No, sir, I'm not going to elaborate on that. I'm not going to speak for the governor in any way. Anybody else have a comment? Please raise your hand. Rick Clark.
Yes, can you hear me, Jason?
Yes, sir.
Well, I just, if this ain't gonna close, I just wanted to say in general terms, I'm very much opposed. I don't know anybody that knows anything about this property, this land out here that is in favor of it. Personally, it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart, and this is really a beautiful piece of land that the public does have access to, and I think that the state is going through difficult times. I know it is. I understand that, but it's not. The sky's not falling. We've been through these periods before when the mineral industry isn't performing the way we would like it to, but nonetheless, we survive. We survive. Do we have to? I just don't think we should be shooting ourselves in the foot by getting rid of a beautiful piece of land that people, if they knew about it, would be in here. And I live by this land. I have people stopping at my place and wanting to know how to get there, and et cetera and so forth. And they're from Minnesota and they're from around the country. And it's, I just oppose. It breaks my heart. And I also am really, really concerned that if this if we give away land like this, what is going to stop probably the same landowner from buying the next piece to the west, and which he's already is leasing, and then connecting Columbus Peak Ranch with Sunlight Ranch, and then the two ranches will be connected. Why, if we do this, we're on the way to losing all of this parcel eventually, and that would be a huge loss to public. And I hope some people will take a look into that. And even though we don't have a crystal ball, we can do better than this. This is not the end of the world because we're having a little recession or whatever in the state right now. We will recover, and let's not sell off our most beautiful, precious resources for short-term gain in real estate. And that's my last comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Anybody else? Please raise your hand. Okay.
Hey, Jason, I have one more.
Okay, Pete, go ahead.
I'd like to thank the state employees for staying on the line late here. I know it's running into your evening, but giving us a chance to present our views, present our comments, it's appreciated. It's a great, wonderful state here in Wyoming, and the employees, what you're doing here tonight, giving us a forum to speak to, and hopefully some follow-on discussions also. And I will follow up with you, Jason. But again, to everybody that's on here from the state, thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Pete.
And I'll give you a call tomorrow, or if not, early next week.
Very good. Okay, one last call. Anybody want to comment? Raise your hand, please. Brett Barney, one more time.
Thank you. So just to follow up, I guess, for Sunlight Ranch and Columbus Peak Ranch both offer public access, general public access to their properties at no charge to hunt and fish. Obviously, because of COVID, we've not allowed that in the past year. But the general public has access to this property, whether it's the state partials or whether it's the private property. And yet, and I'm out there quite a bit, and I don't see all these people out here on this 560 acres. I know that there are people that do hunt part of that, but it's not as widespread as one would think. So thanks again for all of you. Appreciate your public comment.
Thanks, Brett. All right, Doran Larner.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on what Mr. Barney just said. Now, everybody's acknowledged that this parcel of existing state land is quite a walk to access. I've been there, so I'm fully aware of how much of a jaunt it is. And you end up pretty close to public road. If Sunlight Ranch allowed the access that he implied, then you wouldn't be very far from a public road to access that land. I've never mapped it out, so I don't know exactly how far, but it would cut the distance down to, I'm assuming, less than a mile. And I also wanted to speak in opposition to this trade as a sportsman, outdoorsman, a recreationalist, someone who likes to go out and get away from people. this happens to be one of those places that I can do that, especially in the spring when the snow is too deep for my horses up on top. It's a place that I can go and get away from people. And just generally looking at aesthetics, and I realize that it's very difficult to put a value to aesthetics, but looking at the land and what grows on it and what lives on it compared to the land that Sunlight bought a few years back, likely with the intention of proposing this trade, there's no comparison. The one is overgrazed. My understanding is there's noxious weeds on it, and it's bisected by a public road. The other is pristine, undisturbed land. And so that is the end of my comment in opposition.
Thanks, Doran. Let's make sure that we're keeping our comments to the transaction and not to the commenters. We're not debating anybody here. We're just talking about the transaction. Any more comments? All right, Doran, go ahead one more time.
I did also ask a question in chat, and that question was, have any of the board members been to both of the properties?
Thanks, Doran. I don't have the chat open. I don't know if I can even find it. So if there are questions there, Ben, let me know. And we don't know if the board members have been there or not. Can't speak for them. We know that office staff and appraisers have been there, but I don't know about board members. Okay, it seems like we've run to the end of our comments. I want to thank everybody for taking time, spending this late evening with us. We really appreciate you participating in this part of our process. It really provides some valuable insight that sometimes we don't fully understand. So we appreciate everybody participating in it. Again, this public comment process will go until June 14th. Right now, if you'd like to provide any additional comments, please send them to my email, or you can provide them to us through the mail at the address shown on the screen there. And if you have any more questions or any more conversations you'd like to have about this transaction, we're here. So give us a call. But again, thank you guys very much. And hopefully we see you in person next time.